Hi, my name's Todd Stanley, and I'm welcome you to another edition of Todd Talk, where we take teaching theory and turn it into teaching practice. The topic for today's talk is going to be the use of a syllabus and how to create effective syllabus. So there are several tools that I use in my classroom in order to keep my students' eyes on the prize. This is especially important in long-term projects where they can tend to get distracted and where, as the teacher, I'm not on them all the time, keeping them focused. So they have to self-regulate and focus themselves. And so I try to give them tools that are going to allow them to do this. And I use a couple of things. I use a rubric, I use a calendar, and then I use a syllabus, and in that way, it is clear to them what it is the purpose of their project is, and it also is a good communication tool with parents, so that parents are aware what their child is going to be doing. So we're going to be talking today about how to create an effective syllabus. Here's an example of a syllabus that I use with my second and third grade classes. And this was a project called Redesigning the Classroom. And this was one of those projects that, especially with second and third graders, and because of what I was asking them to do, they could very easily get distracted or get lost in what it is that they're supposed to be doing. So the syllabus's goal is to keep them focused. So I start big and then I work my way into more specifics. So for instance, I start with this big idea. And the big idea is take something that you already know and think about it in a different way. So that is the big picture question I'm asking them to do. And I'm asking them to do some specific things within that. But this big idea can be applied to many things, not just this particular project. And that's how I want kids to think about that. So then I get a little more specific and I talk about the essential question. So if I could redesign the classroom, what would you change, if anything? What would you add and what would you get rid of? So this is the nitty-gritty of what they're going to be doing in their project, the overall vision of what they're going to accomplish when they work on this project. They're going to redesign the classroom in a way that they see fit or that they think would be really interesting. I also include constraints. So the constraints in this case, are things that I want to make sure that students know. They're basically requirements, what they can and cannot do. And again, this helps to kind of focus them, keeps them on the road. It keeps them from going in the correct direction. So for instance, one of the constraints is that they had to use a computer program to design and create the classroom. And so they would have to find one online, or I would provide one, or they could choose one of their own, and then they would make an architectural drawing of the classroom in the vision that they have. So that's one thing. The other constraint is the limitations of the actual classroom itself. So a couple things. First off, it has to be able to fit 30 students in it, because that's your typical classroom. You can't cut it down to 10 students because that classroom couldn't be used by anyone. So you can't have a water bed in there or a giant sofa, because it's going to take up too much room. So they have to be practical, and that's for trying to keep them, their eyes on the prize and the practicality of what it is they're trying to do. And similar with having to be realistic about their choices. So they can have really interesting, cool ideas that they want to use in their classroom, but it's got to be somewhat realistic. Like, what is the purpose of it? So if you say, I'm going to have a trampoline, but you don't have a good reason for doing that, then it doesn't make sense. But if you have a good reason, because you have a lot of kids in the class that have ADHD or they're fidgety or whatever, and it allows them to, focus while they're on the trampoline, you could certainly make an argument for that. Or a student could anyways. And then, of course, you can't physically alter the actual room itself. So typically what I did with students is they were using my room as the model, and they actually had to measure the dimensions of it. So we were using math in this, and they were having to take a tape measure and measure all the walls and the width and the length and all that good stuff. And they had to incorporate that into their own design. And so all this together, all these constraints together, leads to what the deliverable is, which is what is the end product that they're going to show me, or that what they've learned in regard to this. So in this case, students had a choice. I like to give students choice. And so students could create a 2D drawing. So it could be using that computer program that they found, or they can take it a step further and create a 3D model of the classroom. But again, the most important thing is here that the model has to represent the dimensions of the actual classroom. You can't take a 15 by 30 classroom and make it the size of a large gym, because we just don't have the room for that. So you can see a lot of this is reining kids in and trying to make sure that they are staying focused on what it is that they are going to be working on. Here's another example of a simple syllabus. This is a this is a science project, and it's called the City of the Future. And so I start with a brief description. I'm just trying to set kids up on what they're going to be looking at. And so I look at the idea of, what will the world look like 25 years into the future? It's something just to get them thinking about, to kind of get whet their appetite. And then I go into what the product is. So in this case, students are going to specifically design a city that's 25 years in the future. One of its constraints is it has to be powered by more responsible energy. So they'll have to figure out what that looks like. And so in the product, it just kind of lays out the general ideas of the product. One thing that's different here than the other one is that I have put the content standards that I want that are going to be covered. So specifically, so students know that they need to somehow show me that they have a device that converts energy from one form to another. And we would talk about in Back to the Future how the car does that and things of that nature. And then the other one is that using energy and fuels are derived from natural resources. So having an understanding of that before you decide what it is that you're going to have your own city be powered by. So this is just an example of, again, I kind of start with a big picture and then get a little more specific example of I've showed you a couple of elementary syllabuses, but this is an example of a high school one. And so what you see here again is a clear breaking down of how it's all going to look in the big picture. If you have too much text or it all runs together, students tend to start to lose what it is they're supposed to be doing. So in this one, I use headings. So I start out with the goals of the project, and I list 5 goals that I want them to do. So they know these are the big picture goals that I want you to get. And then when it comes to the essential knowledge and skills, and this is tying it into the content standards. When I look at the actual assignments and the products, I break that down. So they have to have a research paper as part of this. They have to have a spiritual artwork as part of this. They are going to take tours of religious art and architecture. They're going to do a jigsaw presentation at the end of this. And then they have a literary guild report. So there's several things that are going on there, because a lot of times in high school courses where we have projects, there's a lot going on. It's not as simple as it is in the younger grades, but you need to keep your syllabus simple. And so specifically, I have a timeline here to let them know what this is going to look like and when we're going to be doing, they should be doing various things within the project. But the main thing I want you to get from this is that it is broken up into parts. It's not just one long syllabus where kids will get lost reading in the paragraph. This breaks it up. There are lots of indentations, lots of bolding, italics, that breaks this down exactly what this is going to be. And that's what a syllabus is supposed to do, is clearly convey or communicate what it is that students are going to be doing. What you see here is an example of a project contract that I use with students. My students do a lot of independent study work. They do a lot of inquiry-based learning. And I like them to create their own contract so it keeps them on task and keeps them focused. In this case, though, I think it also works really well for me as a teacher to create my syllabi, because what it does is it breaks it down into parts, which is what you'll essentially want to be doing on your syllabus, is you'll want to be breaking it down into parts. And what are those parts going to look like? So I break it down into several parts. First, on the learning objectives. Learning objectives can come in many forms. It can be, what are goals that you have for the particular project, or what, you can link it to content standards, or you can link it to a 21st century skill. But basically, when students finish this all, what is it that you hope that students have learned from this? It can be one, it can be many. So it's up to you how many learning objectives that you want to have. The second thing I have are skills learned. So in this case, a lot of times students are learning secondary things. Like, for instance, in the redesign in the classroom, they're learning how to use the technology to create an architectural design of the classroom. And so that is a secondary skill that they're learning. It's not the main skill, but it's something that's somewhat important. Or if I had a project where kids had to publicly speak, that is a valuable 21st century skill that kids should have. And so I could list that in the skills of what it may not be the main objective and the main thing I want them to learn, but it's certainly something they're going to learn by going through this. Then I go to the overall goal of the project. So I've broken it down into smaller parts. Now I'm looking, what is my overall goal? What is my essential question of what I want kids to get out of this particular project? So what is it that if they read it, like it's kind of like the summary, but if they read this summary, it would give them a decent idea of what it is they're going to be doing, what it is they're going to be learning. Then I go to specifically to the product of the project. So what are students going to produce to show me they've learned what I want them to learn? So this could be anything from an essay to an exhibition of some sort. It could be a demonstration. There are lots of things that you can have with your product. And sometimes you want to give kids choices. Like I gave choices of the redesign in the classroom. They could do a 3D version or a 2D version. So in your product, you can be specific or as general as you want. You can allude to a menu board so that students can make choices on what they want to do. It's totally up to you. But I do kind of, as a teacher, I want to see in my head what it is a kid would turn into me to show me that they've learned what I want them to learn. And that's what this comes down to. And then it comes down to, and this is going to, especially when we get into making rubrics, I want to break down this product into parts so that I can see when I'm evaluating students, I'm going to be looking for this, I'm going to be looking for this, and I'm going to be looking for this. So if you do this, this is going to help you write your rubric when you go to do that. So this is just a nice graphic organizer to help you to break down your project, because if you can't break it down and make it simple to understand, how are you going to do that for students, or how are students going to be able to do that for themselves? So this kind of forces you to break it down and keep it simple. Here's a link of where you can find this template for this project contract, an electronic version, so that you can use it. But this is what I use to create my own syllabi. So there you have it, some examples of syllabus and how to create your own using the template. There are a couple takeaways to consider. One thing is you want to make sure that you are breaking it down. So especially long-term projects, because if you don't break it down for students, they can get lost very easily. The second thing you want to do is lay out very clearly what you want them to learn. You can mention it a couple times in your syllabus. You can underline it. You can make it bold. But you want to make sure that students know this is what I want you to get more than anything else. Everything else is moot as compared to this essential learning objective that I want you to get. And the third takeaway from a syllabus is that it needs to be broken up in a way that it's easy to read, so that students can look at it, refer to it, and use that as a guide. But also, and equally as important, is that parents can look at it and understand what their child is doing and what it is that they're going to be doing in your classroom. So if you do those three things, then your syllabus should be in pretty good shape.